Welcome to everyone to this webinar from Endress+Hauser. What I'd like to do first is basically give a little bit of background to what we're actually speaking about today. Today's presentation we're entitling to digitalize and optimize, how to make smarter decisions really within your process. Obviously, this is presented by Process Industry Informer magazine, but we wanted to, I guess, present a webinar which speaks to the audience, to you guys who are listening to us at the moment, and really give an insight into how Endress+Hauser really are sort of transforming that industry and what that actually means. I think initially it would be a good idea to talk about, I guess, our presenter, which is Phil Waterworth. Hi, Phil.
Good morning.
Well, thanks for sort of taking the time for this one. I'd like to give sort of a bit of a background. I believe you've been with the company for about 15 years, or thereabouts, and really that's quite a long career. And you've talked really you've been involved with sort of instrument sales, key account management, of course, that kind of thing, but also. I guess project solutions. That's what we're kind of calling it, isn't it? Sure. You really sort of get into the sort of coalface, really helping your customers to really, I guess, look at what their process is, isn't it? It's all about what you're doing at the moment. Where do you want to get to, and how you guys can help people do that with tools. Particularly with data, and how you can use information which you're gathering from your process to really move your business forward. And what does that mean? That can mean cost savings, of course, but it's more than that, isn't it? It's more about how you move forward with really how process evolves, it seems to me, and how that moves forward really with what you want to do at the moment. We talk about digital transformation. What does that mean? And clearly in the process industry, that's kind of a big deal because we're trying to move everything forward. And how do you evolve those systems? Today's presentation from Phil, we'll do that first, I believe. Anyone that sort of would like to ask a question, you can do so via this platform. I will see the question that you've actually asked, and I will track that while Phil is presenting. And at the end, we'll do a sort of Q&A, which I think would be really insightful after you've sort of seen the presentation, and what kind of questions initially spring to mind. I think that's a really good way of sort of doing these kind of things. If you'd like to come on as video, if you have a webcam and ask the question directly to Phil, that's absolutely fine. If you don't, you can use audio, or if you'd like me to present the question to Phil, I can do that as well. We'll do that at the end as a sort of Q&A once we've had a look at Phil's presentation. So without further ado, Phil, I think I'd like to hand over to you for I'm sure will be a cracking presentation on the subject today, and so I will track all the questions which should come in, and then we'll sort of reconnect at the end and have a chat through anything that people would like maybe a bit more information on. So I'm sure some of the stuff that you're going to cover we need a bit more insight maybe, and a little bit more detail on maybe some of the slides which you're going to present to us. So over to you, Phil, and we'll sort of catch you on the end.
Thank you. Okay, yeah. Morning, everybody. Thank you for the lovely introduction. I'm just going to share my slides here, so just give me a second while I press a few buttons here. Here we go. All right, that should be heading your way as we speak. So thank you for joining me this Monday morning. Hopefully you'll find this a useful and interesting start to your working week. So the topic, the title we all know. Does appear quite wordy, I suppose, initially. How to transform your processes with advanced data collection and analytics. So what I'm going to do with that topic is it's one of these topics you could talk about, or certainly I could talk about for quite a long time. I could spend all week talking about it if you want. But what I'm going to do is pick some key areas which I think covers this topic quite nicely. And I've kind of broken that down into 5 sections. And I suppose before I go through these, let me start by explaining who Endress+Hauser are. maybe not everybody on the call knows Endress+Hauser. We are a Swiss company, and our main area of business is manufacturing process instrumentation for the process industry. So we're talking flow meters, pressure transmitters, analytical liquid analysis instrumentation. That's kind of our core business there. And over the years, our business has grown from just rather than just manufacturing the instruments to actually then, okay, what do the instruments do? Where do they connect to? And growing our solutions and project business really around that sort of area. So we're very interested these days in how the data is being used from our devices and helping customers interpret and understand that data and make use of it. And that kind of brings me on to what we're looking at today. So here's the 5 sections I want to try and cover in the next 20 minutes or so. We're going to be looking at instruments because obviously in H we're an instrument manufacturer. So the view we're taking is starting at an instrument point of view. Throughout the presentation, we're going to discuss something called Natillion. Now, Natillion is our is a solution that we provide. It's a cloud-based solution, and we're going to have a look at that, and that's going to help us sort of discuss some of these topics as we go through the presentation. We're going to look at collecting data from a site. How do we get data from a site and put it somewhere useful? Once we've got that data, how do we look at these things? Some ways of looking at it, and one of I think the most interesting topics I always think is data enrichment, and this is quite powerful, and we'll go into this topic throughout the presentation. And of course, we want to touch on the topic of security, because a lot of things these days, and certainly our offering, are actually cloud-based. And so this brings up the question of cybersecurity. You know, taking data from a plant, getting it into a cloud space. That there's now topics of cybersecurity. So quite a varied view of the topic. But hopefully, as we go through and I look at some of these points, you'll find some interesting stuff here, and it'll prompt some questions for the end. So I'm just going to stick a timer on here because I don't want to over talk for this morning. So let's start with this slide here. There's lots of words buzzing around these days: Industry 4.0, digital journey, digital transformation, and these kind of started to appear, gosh, quite a few years ago now. And perhaps when they first appeared, people may have thought these are a bit of a buzzword. You know, what's this all about? But actually, what we're starting to see now from customers is that people are really taking these topics seriously. This topic of digitalization, digital transformation. There's companies now who have digital projects in place and digital teams with the whole idea of moving their business forward, because people can now see the benefits of digitalizing and making use of data. Because that's really what Industry 4.0 focuses around, and that is getting data and making use of it in a useful way. And actually, that's an important point. Data, I think the people are saying these days, data is king. You know, if you got data, this is great. But actually, there's so much data out there. There's so much data you can get from your plant devices, be that instruments, be that other assets on your site. But it's all very well and good getting all the data and putting it somewhere, maybe on a database on site or maybe a cloud database. But if you've not got then the knowledge and the understanding of the data and ways to visualize and use it correctly, it's a bit of a waste of time. So the important thing about data is, yes, data is great, but you want that data to be able to make your improve your processes, maybe optimize the way you're working, improve, increase your productivity or efficiency. To be able to do that, you need to make sure you've got the right data and you're looking at it and using it in the right way. So, I mean, I touched on this a little bit at the beginning, but why are we now interested in data as a company and presenting data to customers? If we look at ourselves as a company, as I say, our core business is manufacturing instrumentation. And to date, I mean, this slide is actually about a year old. So at the point of this slide, we had an installed base of our devices of over about 40 million devices out there. And obviously some of these are quite old, some of these are brand new, but the point is that even the older devices have the ability to have a lot of data inside them and have the ability to make that data available. However, a large percentage of those, the data is not being used. So that's kind of where we're at. We want to help people make use of this data that they've either got or that they'll get as they purchase additional assets and things for their site. And if we look at this quite white slide, we can see here there's some instrumentation here. There's a flow meter, a pressure transmitter, some analytical equipment here. And people would generally buy these devices because what's the primary function of this device here? Well, it's to measure flow. So this will be purchased, connected up most probably by an analog signal to a control system, and it's measuring flow, and that flow rate's going off, and it's going to help people. It's going to go into a PLC of some sort, and that'll be used to control the process and make the product that the plant's making. However, this device has a lot more information inside there than just this flow. And this is where we're at the moment, trying to help people unlock this data. You can see there's a big lock symbol here. There's a lot more data in there. We want to help people unlock that data and make use of it. Taking that flow meter as an example, if you were just if you just hooked it up to an analog signal, there would be the one flow rate. But look at all this other information that's in there that could be useful. There's information, there's multi-measurements for a start. So there's not just a flow rate. There's maybe density. There's maybe temperature. There's maybe pressure. There's a good 6, 7, maybe more measurements in that device that could be useful. But there's also information like about the device itself. What is it? How old is it? Who the manufacturer is? There's information about health or diagnostics. Am I operating okay? Have I got a problem? If I've got a problem, what is it? And there's also information like performance data. We class it as performance data, which is lots of internal measurements. Now that might not be very useful at the face of it for a customer or for somebody at a plant level, but that data can be taken and used elsewhere to give, and we'll see in a bit later, some really useful information about how your device is performing and how that could be useful to maybe maintenance strategies or optimization on your site. So lots of additional information that could be used in our assets, many other people's assets. So all the assets, the instrumentation, valves, motors, all that sort of stuff on your site, there's a lot of information inside of those devices. Just want to quickly touch on our offering, which is Natillion. To really set the scene here, we call it a digital ecosystem, and that's because the word ecosystem, it's something that's growing. It's something that improves over time, and I think that's one of the powers of things like IIoT, and Industrial Internet of Things, is that you can quite quickly change and optimize the way that data is presented or shown based on customers' needs and the requirements from industry. But just to touch on Natillion, it kind of covers 5 areas. First of all, you've got the instrumentation or the assets down at the bottom. You can see a lot of these are locked away, as we saw on the previous slide, but a number of these have got some sort of connection, digital connection in place. We've got we offer hardware for data collecting, so accessing the data within instrumentation and assets at the site level. We've got obviously data that goes up to the cloud, and then we have a way of presenting that data in what we believe is an easy and useful way to people. So we have a suite of standard applications which picks out key data from all these different devices and shows it in useful ways. But then we also have an option and a way of getting that data from our cloud into other locations. And that could be something like an SAP ERP system, or a maintenance system, or some sort of scheduling system that you may use a separate cloud space that you've standardized as a company. So using secure data transfer, the data that we receive from devices on a site level, as well as additional data that we add in, can be then collected and sent elsewhere as well. So that's the Natillion ecosystem in very general terms. Let's now talk about data collection. So getting data from these devices that potentially is locked away inside them. We've got a pyramid here. This is a no more principle. It's the control pyramid. And very often you've got instruments and valves, all your process assets at the bottom here, connected probably to some sort of DCS or PLC system. That data is obviously going to be used for controlling your plant. It may filter up into other maintenance systems or company ERP systems. And you could potentially pull data off at any point in here and do something with it. But the way we use it is another standardized way called the second or parallel data channel. And what we do and what people do is you tap in at the bottom end. So the data that's being sent between the DCS PLC and the assets on site, and then you've got some hardware that securely sends that up to the cloud. So it doesn't affect any of this standard control pyramid. It's passing just that additional data that's probably not being used anyway up this second channel here. And it's important to know that that's done because of the use of open protocols. So the devices, the assets at the bottom end on your plant level, all, even if you've got an analog device, so a 4 to 20 milliamp device, is likely to have some sort of digital communication protocol. And there's a number of key protocols out there that are used in the process industry. You can see the big ones here. You've got HART, you've got Profibus, and of course you've got some of the more industrial Ethernet type protocols that are now being used more favorably. And at the moment we're able to tap onto any of these with an edge device and a number of different gateways. But we're also, as a company, developing connection to some of the other key digital protocols that the process industry are using, Profinet and also OPC UA. And obviously, so the key here is that devices, whether they be Endress+Hauser, whether they be another manufacturers, are most likely going to have some sort of digital standard open protocol available to use. And that's how we can very easily access the data out of the devices, because with all of these protocols, there's a standard way of making data available. We also, as a company, have some other edge devices, and it's called an edge device because it sits on the edge of the real physical world and the virtual world or the internet. The other edge devices we have available are, for example, Bluetooth edge devices. So some of our newer devices have Bluetooth capability. So they may have a wired connection to the PLC, but they have a secure Bluetooth connection there as well. And that could be used so wirelessly without even having to cut into your existing wiring. That could be used to get the additional data out as well. And there's devices on the market now which are actually connected devices that don't have any connection to, sorry, actually have an edge device built into them. So the data is being sent straight up to a cloud service from the device. So once the data's been extracted or made available by using these open protocols and some sort of hardware which picks up the standard traffic that's on these open protocol systems. We want to actually make use of the data. And as I said at the beginning, getting data is great, but just getting loads and loads of data and walloping it into a server or a database is not all that useful. You need to make use of it. And you can see here from this slide, we have a number of simple front-end applications which focus on some of the key data that's coming out of process assets. Before we go into that, just a quick word on this term digital twin. This is a term that people love to use and throw about, but it's actually quite powerful and it's quite simple to understand. You have a physical asset on a site. You can see here this is a physical flow meter. This is connected up via a digital open protocol and an edge device. And because of that, some key information about the device has been populated into the cloud. And there's a digital representation of that now in the cloud. What it is, who the manufacturer is, some additional information can be added from a manual point of view in terms of photos, a location, and how accessible it is. Is it important to your QA procedures, for example? And now there's a digital representation or a digital twin of that device in the cloud. And once you're at that point, you can start to do some interesting stuff with the additional data it's sending up. You can start to do analysis, automatic analysis of what you've got on your plant. You know, what's the sort of split of manufacturers I've got? What's the split of instruments, actuators, equipment I have on my site? This can be useful from a QA point of view. It can be useful from you can see here an obsolescence point of view, because certainly from our equipment, we're able to automatically advise, you know, what's the age of your plant in terms of the assets. Manual things can be put in there as well, so criticality. So lots of useful information about what the device is. This is the device information I talked about earlier. And linking that all together with everything on your plant, you can start to build up a picture of you know, doing a really nice analysis of what's going on the asset side of your plant there. There's health reporting, again presented in a nice clear way, based on a standard by the NMOR, NE 107, which is a standard on health or diagnostic reporting, because actually an asset is not just good or failed. If it's failed, you're going to know about it because your process has stopped. But it's the bits in between which are useful. Is there some maintenance required? Is it out of specification? Is there a function within the device that isn't working properly? Even though it's giving you a reading back to your control system, knowing whether or not there's something not quite right that needs looking at from a maintenance point of view is useful. And if we go back to this enrichment topic, we get the data about whether or not there's a diagnostic and what it is, but then we enrich that with what is the problem in plain English, what's the cause, and what's the remedy. And we can even add things like help videos as well to show how to repair easy things, all that sort of stuff. So you can now start to see you taking the data from a device, enriching it with some additional data starts to become really, really useful and useful to people to actually make use of the data that's there. Documentation, big topic. If you know what's connected from the device information, which the Natillion cloud, for example, would do, it can then drop in the relevant documentation for that specific device, that specific asset. So you no longer need to go searching our website or the web. You don't need to go back to paper manuals. You know in that digital twin representation that the exact documentation for that device is there. And that could be certification, calibration certificates, maybe a configuration report brought up directly from the device, verification that it's working okay, lots of useful documents that add in during the lifespan of a device, but you can go to that right away so you know exactly that you're looking at the right documents. I mean, that's pretty powerful stuff from a quality and and a legislation, depending on which industry you are, point of view. Okay, just checking the time. Of course, you've got the live values. I think I mentioned at the beginning, multi-parameters. You may only be using the one main parameter into your control system, but there's multi-parameters in a device. Pretty useful to see that sometimes. You know, in this example here, there's a level device which has got a percentage coming through, a height point of view. There's a distance from the actual radar in this sense. There's temperature coming in as well here. So all these multi-parameters, which can be trended and exported and played around with, are available. And also, it's worth remembering, if you're looking at cloud and IIoT, all this data is available as long as you've got the right authentication and security anywhere. So this data then is no longer just at the control room. This might be useful if an operator or a manager or an engineer is working from home, which is, you know, become more popular recently. They can actually see the live values and get alarms and alerts if either certain values are hit or certain diagnostic conditions are hit, so that they can act or get people to act even if they're remote from the location that the devices are. Before I go on to that slide there, just a couple of things here. One of the things that's becoming quite powerful in Industry 4.0 and IIoT is this topic of artificial intelligence. And we're certainly looking at that as well. And this shows the next level of data enrichment and this sort of thing. So rather than just reporting on the live health that's coming from a device, we can now also get that information as well as the performance data we talked at the beginning about, and we can build algorithms around that based on our experience, because again, we're experts in what we manufacture. We can then start to provide health scores and lifetime scores around, depending on how the device is installed and the process is in, when certain maintenance activities will be required on a device. So you don't need to wait for the device to report that there's a problem. You can actually, using the artificial intelligence algorithms, start to predict when certain maintenance activities are required and give an overall health score of a device. So there's some really clever stuff that we're doing, that people are doing on different assets and giving this information. And as I say, this information, the screenshots I've shown here in the examples are our front-end simple applications, but this data can also be sent to other systems. So it may be that the documentation actually sits better in an SAP system, or the maintenance health information might sit better in a maintenance planning application. You know, examples of this are, yes, you get a live health diagnostic sent from a device that actually then schedules automatically a maintenance engineer to carry out the task, providing them with the information as to what's wrong and how to solve that. Excuse me. And then when the maintenance activity is complete, the engineer may sign it off, but the system doesn't actually close the job until the instrument reports back that it's gone back to a healthy state. So you can start to see where data versus knowledge from the manufacturer point of view versus human interaction all starts to mesh together to create to help you make useful decisions and optimize things. This is an interesting slide which we found from a survey that was carried out, focusing actually on the topic of IIoT, which is the big enabler that we see for for these Industry 4 discussions. What are the hurdles? What are the main hurdles that people see from to be able to do things with IIoT or Industry 4 or digitalization? Security is the big one, and I think that's understandable, because if you're looking at potentially allowing some data off-site, obviously there's going to be security concerns there. No budget, incompatibility, actually some customers have no strategy. As I say, digital strategies are starting to become more commonplace, certainly within bigger companies around the world. There's teams developing digital strategies around all areas of their business because they see it as important. Some people see them as complex. They really don't have to be. I think if you look at everything with a big umbrella view, it can seem quite daunting. But actually, if you tackle certain applications and certain aspects, the complexity really isn't. It doesn't have to be that overly complex. But let's take a look to the right and see what people think the benefits of such things are. Reduce costs, compliance, agility, growth, competitive advantage. So I think the point here, and this explains why bigger companies have got these digital teams and digital strategies in place, because actually if you get it right, if you get the data in the right place, if you get the right data in the right place with the additional knowledge and experience added to that, you really can become more agile. It will help with compliance in certain situations, of course, but it potentially allows companies to grow. And also, if you can streamline things and become more agile, there's a competitive advantage there. So there's some quite interesting statistics there come from this survey that was done by the World Economic Forum. That kind of brings me nicely on to my my last topic in the 5 things I wanted to cover. Cybersecurity. As I said, as we saw on that previous slide, security concerns is top of the list, or one of the top of the list when it comes to hurdles. So it would be remiss of me not to mention cybersecurity in this overview we have this morning. And really, I can talk from our point of view. Certainly for ourselves, when we started on this journey of developing a cloud-based system we believe can be powerful and helpful to people. We wanted to take security seriously because we were aware that if you don't, no one's going to be interested. So there are standards out there which focus on international standards out there that focus on cybersecurity in particular. You've got ISO 27001, which is all about data and information security. You've got ISO 27017, which is more about the cloud security side. And you've also got an IEC standard, which is actually about product security. So there's actually three things to consider here when we're thinking about cybersecurity. I guess from a product level, is the product secure? So can that be hacked, or how is that secure? Okay, hot product, great. If I'm going to send my data somewhere, is the cloud secure? Is my data going to be safe? And this is where 27017 comes in. And then from an information side, so a company as a whole, how are you handling information? This is how 27001 comes in. And I'm able to proudly say that Endress+Hauser, as a company, offering products and offering cloud solutions to people and ways of getting the data into cloud solutions, we have recently been awarded the compliance and the certificates for all of these standards here, which is quite powerful, and for me that shows that we're taking this topic seriously. I think it's important to say on the cloud security point of view, it's not just the cloud where we host the data that's focused on. It's also the data transmission. It's It's how is the edge device secured? Can you get data? Can you get into it, or does it only send data up? How is the data encrypted? All that sort of thing. From an information and a cloud security point of view, also when you're logging on to things, how secure is that? What two-factor authentication is something that people ask for a lot. That's something that we provide because that adds that extra level of security to a cloud, a place where there's data being stored. So that kind of brings me to the end. A lot of information there, I understand, and I think it's fair to say that if I just picked one of those topics, we could very easily cover a 20-30 minute 1 hour webinar just looking at one topic in detail. So what I've tried to do there is give you a bit of an overview, certainly how we see things and where we're coming from and what we're hoping to assist customers with and the reasons why. Just here, there's some further information on what we do, and embarrassingly enough, that first URL is actually spelt wrong. But hey, that's one I've just picked up. But actually, the one I want to point you to is this blog that we have. We have a blog within our Netillion website, and it has 5-6 minute reads posted, every couple of weeks, and that's been going on for about a year or so now. So I would suggest to people have a look at this blog because there's some really interesting 5-6 minute reads on the topics of digitalization, cloud security, IIoT, all that sort of stuff. So I would point you towards that, and that's kind of where I end. So I will close my presentation. I will try to close my screen sharing. Just a second. Stop sharing. There we go.
That works absolutely fine.
Thanks for your time, and back to yourself. Have we got any questions?
Absolutely, and that's exactly what I was going to say. If anyone who's sort of listened, to that insightful presentation from Phil, do let us know some questions. There's a simple box you can type that in, and I can invite you to put your question to Phil. I think listening to all of that, Phil, it's what kind of occurs to me is that ultimately it's about giving your process intelligence, isn't it? It's moving what in effect is a dumb valve, for instance, or a process which has no data capturing ability, and giving it that kind of capability. And that can be right down to individual components and right the way across to process, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what Netillion sort of sits. It kind of sits in the middle. You talk about an ecosystem, excuse me, and I think that's right. I think because what you're creating then is a space for that intelligence to be utilised. Mm-hmm. That seems to be the core of what the system is really offering to process. Yeah,
I would agree. It's an enabler, really, and I think that there's some key messages there to sort of fulfil that. One, you mentioned dumb valve there. I think one of the first points I mentioned was it may appear dumb, but there's probably a lot of information locked away. So actually, it's worth mentioning that when you're looking at digitalization and making use of data, one of the hurdles was cost. And that's because some people believe that digitalization means ripping everything out.
Yeah.
And actually, that's not the case. But yeah, Netillion ecosystem as a whole, I would say, kind of sits in there. It's an enabler. But you've got to use. It's got to be the right data to be useful to what you're trying to do, I guess.
Yes, and I think that's that's kind of. I think a lot of process managers they understand what their new digital roadmap has to look like. They know where they want to get. They want to get somewhere. They need to do something to modernise and move forward. And that's more utilisation of data, clearly. But it's how do you get there? We can attach a sensor to something, and we can extract the data. I think your presentation was very clear that really what Endress+Hauser is about is it's that utilization. It's let's extract the information from the data, but not just any old information that's useful to you. What are your core goals for your process, or what do you want to do with your plant? Once you understand those questions, then you can start looking at the data that allows you to get there, and that's the important connection to make between how data is collected and what you use it for.
Yeah, and the way we come at it as well is that yes, we could sell you a cloud space which you can visualize some key data on, but actually the approach that we like to take is more consultative. Why do you want that data? Why is it useful to you?
Yep.
What else can we add to that to enrich the data?
Yep.
So that you can, it becomes it allows you to optimize rather than just being data on a screen.
That's right. Although you did mention, which I think is obviously a topic which is front of mind for everyone, which is AI, and what that means. How does that factor in? But I always think with AI, also in the equation seems to be automation. How can we automate either some of our plants, some of our system, even some of our data management and our analysts? Can we do that with these AI tools? And can that be a level of automation which reduces costs, but gives us that insight which you've been talking about with your presentation? So it seems to be AI connects. It's not isolated. It has to be part of a whole, and that ideal extra bit. That's the automation and AI add on some data, and that's a heady mix, but that's a really useful source of information for your process.
Absolutely. It's and I think AI is certainly ourselves. We're kind of just touching on AI at the moment. We've got some good stuff we're doing, but I see AI becoming even more useful and usable, I guess, as time goes on. I agree with you. I think it's all very well and good having AI, but I think the automation side is important because what's the aim of doing all of this? It's to make you more agile. It's to make you more efficient. It's to speed otherwise potentially mundane jobs up. There's
Sure.
that as well. So
Sure.
AI is great, but you need the automation side makes it extremely powerful.
Yes, and I think that's kind of when Tillian comes into the process, isn't it? Because all of these tools are available, and you could go and buy that and create a bespoke system for your process. But it's the management, isn't it? It's the overall view of what processes you are attaching those sensors to, what data it's creating, and then what are you using the AI for? What are you trying to get out of that? I think if you define that, I think that's where Endress+Hauser is strong, isn't it? Because you ask your customers that question, and what comes back that influences your recommendations. How do you get to the end goal? But you have a set of tools, and I thought the part of the presentation which talked about the front end tools, the applications. It's not just one; it's a suite. You decide what bolts together for your business because it's ideal for you.
Yeah, and that's something quite important for what we're offering. There is, and don't want to name or anything, but there's mindsets where some people just want to get as much data into one place and show it as one web page with thousands of data points. The approach we've taken is we could have done that, but we've broken our front ends into a suite of applications, so focused on specific jobs, if you like, or activities, because some data is more useful to one profession or one job role compared to another one. For example, you might want to have an overview of what's on your plant and the age of equipment from an asset, if you're an asset manager on site or you're that sort of thing. But then health data is useful to maintenance teams, perhaps. Documentation is maybe useful to QA people. And it's very easy to get all this stuff buried in one place if you don't break it up. So yes, you can move quite nicely between the different applications, but we took the view that let's focus the information so it doesn't get too heavy and lost.
Yes, and I think that's kind of an issue for a lot of processes, isn't it? What they're creating is huge data lakes. You know, the information's there; it's just sitting on a server somewhere or several servers, and that's another issue. If it's all siloed, that's a big issue. How do you connect all that together so you create a useful data lake? But it's the extraction, isn't it? It's that idea that you have valuable information, but you can't see it. It's just not visible. So how do you get that access to that information? How do you make it visible? And as you just said, how do you then present that to the right people at the right time? And also, which you also touched on, of course, which is big at the moment, can you do that remotely? Yeah, can you do that from from anywhere in the world? Well, yes, you can, because a lot of these tools are sort of they're hosted, they are cloud based. So it kind of removes the kind of a barrier to using that information. You know, you have that data with you wherever you are. If you get an alarm, it can be acted upon. That wasn't the case. You know, only a few years ago, that wasn't the case at all. But I guess from your point of view, when you're speaking to sort of your client base, is that kind of top of mind? Is that their major challenge? Is that we have the data, but we just simply don't have the capability or the tools to do something useful with it? Is always that the first? Is that top of their mind, or are you having more nuanced conversations?
I would say that the more nuanced conversations actually. We don't have the data, but we want it. I would say that's probably the bigger conversations we're having at the moment.
Oh, so it's really it's kind of base level. We're still not collecting the right data at the right time.
Yeah, I think there's a mixture. I think we're getting a lot of we don't know whether we've got the right data. Let's have a look. So some people don't have the data at all. Some people have some data, it's not right. Yes, there are companies and there are people out there that have pools of data. I would say we are at the moment talking more with people who don't necessarily have the data, to be honest.
I think it's a hurdle, absolutely. It's a challenge, but it's not insurmountable. It's not that at all. I think the kind of the approach is always to. I think you mentioned earlier that you don't have to make massive fundamental changes to your process. It's an incremental change if that's what you want. If you are exploring AI, if you are exploring IIoT, and what that means for your business, it's baby steps. It's what do you want to do? We're not saying that you must rip out all of your plant and machinery to put a sensor in, for instance. That's not necessary. But the incremental steps you do take can be transformative, it seems to me, because then you start to collect that data, and once you have it, then there's a whole new world which you can start to explore. Yeah. We've actually had a question, Phil, from Deepak. I'd like to try and invite the attendee to the screen if I can. So I'm just invited them to the screen if they'd like to ask their question. If not, I'll obviously put it to you. Well, I think, excuse me, I think Deepak either doesn't have a webcam or would rather not. So Deepak asks, how much can we rely on the additional data from devices, and how robust will the data processing and outputs, as most of the machine learning AI tools are not 100% accurate? That's a very good point, isn't it? It's that whole thing about garbage in, garbage out, isn't it?
Yeah, it's an interesting question.
It is, yeah.
Oh, yeah. How much can we rely on them?
Yeah.
I mean, I
It, yeah.
guess, yeah. It's this is the same old thing that's been around for years. If you can't trust the data in, definitely don't trust the data out. So
Absolutely
I
not.
guess
No.
I guess the first hurdle is to get reliable data in, and that's actually fairly easy. The data in can be reliable because I think we mentioned before we're using digital protocols directly connected to the source. So the data from, for example, instrumentation is not being passed through in the way we were looking at earlier through other control processes. So it's not getting mixed up potentially on the way. It's basically data from source. So I think the oh, I've lost your sound, Dave.
Have I gone? Has my sound gone out? You hear
There,
me?
you're back. Yeah,
Super.
yeah. I saw you talking. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's important. It's not Chinese whispers. It's not.
Yeah.
It doesn't get diluted and maybe changed before it gets to say a process manager who's looking at the data. That's I think Diffback has got a very important point when you're using AI. It's that explainability. Do you understand how that's going to influence the outputs? Yeah. Do you understand what the AI is going to do for you and how it takes in the data and what does it do with it? And then what output do you get? I mean, do you guys spend a lot of time, I guess, looking at that process? What comes in, what comes out? And then when you act on it, does that give you the outcome you're looking for? That circle of reliability. Is that something that Endress+Hauser you're looking at in detail when you're evolving your AI tools?
Yeah, definitely. We have a team of people in Switzerland looking at specific applications where we want to utilize AI. Sorry, and I said one of the key ones that is we have at the moment is being able to provide some predictive maintenance information on devices.
Yep.
And that is has a phenomenal amount of people, boffins I like to call them, who have a lot of information about how our devices handle in certain environments versus the live data. And I don't think we would release that as a function for people if we didn't have a high percentage accuracy on what we were providing out. I think it's very much application dependent. What's the AI doing, as you said? If you've some AI is extremely impressive from people. It promises a lot, but is it a bit woolly at the moment? Some of it, I think it probably is. I think the way we're tackling it at the moment is looking at very small use case examples where we feel AI fits. But I do think as people's experience of AI and the way that people are adopting machine learning and all this sort of stuff improves, I think the reliability will improve. But yeah, it's a difficult one to put a figure on, to be honest with you, Deepak. I think it's a really interesting question.
Yeah. It's early days. I mean, it's early days. I think we're still trying to work out the rules. We're still trying to understand. And when we talk about AI, really, we're talking about machine learning. That's really what we're talking about. And what that means for us for process management. And potentially, it could be very, very powerful. Let's not forget that these tools are evolving rapidly, and they will, from my view, it will transform process management. It just will, because it will give managers, I guess, almost another right arm. Can I offload some of my responsibilities to that machine? Is that possible? And if we've done the testing, we've got someone like Endress+Hauser to look at our process. The answer is yes, you can. Maybe not today, but it's not on the distant horizon, is it? It's rapidly approaching, where you will have these tools available to your process managers, kind of off the shelf. But then, is it really a case? I think what you were talking about right at the top of your presentation, that that's fine if you want to do something fairly basic, but really the power is when you look at the process in detail. When you guys go into a business and start to really analyze what you guys are doing, how you're doing it, and what you want to do in the future. And And that's where kind of that's where Netillion really sits in the middle, isn't it? That's kind of where we are, and AI, machine learning, is part of that, isn't it? It will be part of Netillion at some point.
And absolutely, and it will probably become an increasing part as time goes on, I guess.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, the other thing I wanted to sort of touch on, I guess, is it's really about, I guess, how businesses want to do something that is innovative just for them. I think they're all redrawing their digital roadmaps at the moment because of COVID just basically threw that out the window. What it means for the process, what it means for supply chain, what it means for their workforces, all of these elements. I mean, isn't Netillion capable of, I guess, looking at all of those components and then presenting, to a user a scenario which is useful and actionable by them? That's kind of your approach, isn't it? To take those elements within the ecosystem, as you call it, and then you present that, but it's not an umbrella which everyone can use. It's specific for you, and that personalisation seems to me to be another major component of this conversation, isn't it? It's personalised to your business, to your process.
It is, yeah, and as I say, one of the things we mentioned on one of the slides is what we call Netillion Connect, which is an API, which allows for a secure connection to other systems. Because I think Netillion does a lot, but Netillion doesn't do everything, and no cloud or tool will ever do everything. So it's important to be able to have these connections where you can, we can do certain things with our tooling within Netillion. We can enrich that data. It's my favorite term at the moment, enriching it. So as a manufacturer, we can add additional information in there, whether that's AI information or whether that's some other key information from some other databases we have, and make that available through another system. So
that's interesting, isn't it? Yeah, because I think a lot of businesses are quite insular. Let's look at what we do. Let's look at our data. I think what you're saying is that's fine, and that's obviously the initial step. But if you go outside and look at other useful pieces of data or the useful databases which could impact on your process or how you manage that, that's a whole new level, because then you're opening your business to really potentially quantum leaps if that data is used correctly. So you kind of advocate, let's look at what you've got. But then let's look at data which is available outside of your business.
Exactly.
How can that be useful?
Yeah, and this is the power of IIoT, isn't it? It's different data sources and bringing the right ones together. Because, as you say, we're looking at data coming directly from devices.
Yep.
We're looking at data from some internal databases we have, enriching that there. But then there's data from, let's think of a basic example here. There's weather data, publicly available. That's a really simple example. That could be really powerful to add to if we're doing some analysis on some process. Pull the weather data in.
Indeed.
There's energy management data coming in. There's workforce data from other places. So there's lots of different data sources, and this is where I guess there's the danger of getting overloaded with data.
Yeah.
So this is where the strategy is important, because you decide what your goal is, and then you pick out the key bits of data and pull it all together.
Well, of course, that's where Endress+Hauser is powerful, isn't it? Because you build bespoke systems for your client base, but it's based on exactly what you just outlined. It's not a case of more and more data. It's really less is more. It's focused data, isn't it? That's what you've got. We'll extract what's useful, but we'll also say, well, you could also add some of the supply chain data, for instance, if that's useful for your process. And how does that work? But not everything. Yeah, we don't want to create a massive data lake, because then you're kind of back to square one. Too much data, and you're just swamped by the information.
It's the old adage of alarm blindness, isn't it? When you've got an alarm system on a site and it's going off every 30 seconds with nonsense alarms, it's blindness to that, and you've got the potential of having the same issue with data if you're not more specific about what you're trying to do.
I think that's true. I think that's ultimately that's kind of the message, isn't it? That our data is fine and you can collect that, but data is it's a resource, and you need to use that correctly.
Yeah.
I think we're basically out of time, which is amazing. That's flown by. We don't have any more questions for you, Phil. So I think we'll probably end it there. Okay. I say this webinar I think has been really insightful from Endress+Hauser. It's kind of opened I think a lot of questions in people's minds, which of course they can come back to you in more detail. And I would obviously advise people to go and have a look at the general site, but also the site that's specific for Netillion, which will give people a bit more information specifically about that tool and what it could do for their business. Initially. Yep. I think. Well, thanks again, Phil, for taking the time, and also like to thank everyone that's joined us today for the attendees. I hope you all found that insightful as I did, and hopefully we can meet again at some point in the future.
Yeah, thanks for your time, everybody. Have a good day.
Indeed. So take care, Phil, and speak soon.